Look at Law is underwritten by the generous support of Bond, Shoeneck, and King. Knowledgeable, professional, and accessible.
Welcome back, everyone. Yes, another installment of Look at Law with my guest, Mike Billok, who's a member. That's how you have to say it, right? You're a lawyer, but you're a member.
Yes.
Okay, you got to do it legally correct here, right, Michael? Bond, Shoeneck, and King, welcome back. Mike.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you here. As we do a lot of look at seniors, and when we're looking at law, Michael and I were sitting down talking about it, and there's so many areas of law with so much information to help educate you and keep you informed on the kinds of things that we should know. We started off talking about labor law. We've talked about discrimination. One of the areas that Michael wanted to raise and talk about was issues related to pay. And it was interesting when you brought that up to me, Michael, because I thought, oh, that didn't hit my radar right away. You think about discrimination, you think about some of those kinds of issues because they're in the news a lot and whatever. And all of a sudden in our region, tip credit starts raising. It's, overtime pay and the issues regarding that we're hearing more and more about. So I'm really glad we're going to have this conversation about this. Let's just sort of set the framework here.
Sure, absolutely.
When you talk about pay issues, give me the essence of what that means.
Absolutely. So the biggest issue really is for employees to be paid correctly for the time that they work. And
Yes.
if that doesn't happen, employer can find themselves subject to risk from whether it's the Federal Department of Labor, New York State Department of Labor, but one of the biggest risks is a lawsuit, whether it's from just that employee or a class action or collective action where that employee represents not only that one employee, but all the employees and possibly previous employees of that employer.
And that's just to cross a bunch of T's here. Class action suit means that, right? That one person represents a class of people, and they could be current employers. Can they be former employees as well?
Correct, absolutely.
Oh, wow.
And when you're talking about wage issues, a employee can go back under New York state law 6 years. So 6 years of current and former employees can add up pretty quickly.
Give me an example of the kinds of issues that come across your desk. I think you had told me meal breaks, for instance, were an issue. What's that about?
Well, under New York state law, if an employee works for more than 6 hours, they're entitled to a half-hour meal break. And a lot of ways, way that some employers handle this issue is to just automatically deduct that half-hour time from the timekeeping system, which is fine as long as employees are getting that half-hour time off. But in situations in a very busy workplace where employees don't get that half-hour uninterrupted meal break and they're working through it, if it's very common for employees to work through it, they're working through a meal break for which they're not being paid. And if it is that type of common policy, then it's very easy to be subject to a class action or collective action.
Now, just think about your own employment or your own employees that, we work when we have to work, and a lot of times you don't know, and a lot of us, especially in the media business, we'll work right through lunch or we have a sandwich at our desk, and that's not considered a meal break, correct?
Correct, it's not.
That's
And
right.
there should be a mechanism where if you work through lunch, then you can report it to your supervisor and get paid for it.
Right.
But in some circumstances, either there isn't such a mechanism, or if there is, it's not really used widely.
Right, and there's subject to abuse too, I would imagine. What about overtime? That's one that confuses a lot of people.
Sure. Overtime, employees are entitled to time and a half if they work over 40 hours a week, and that's non-exempt employees. So,
Yes, right.
Well, and sometimes employers think there's hourly and salaried, I can't even say it, salaried
Yes,
employees,
right,
not
sure.
salaried employees. Just because somebody's paid on a salary doesn't necessarily mean they're exempt. They might still have to be paid overtime even if they work 40 hours a week, which is something that a lot of employers aren't aware of, or it's something that doesn't happen frequently.
What Michael's referring to there is that if you're an exempt employee, they mean you're exempt from overtime. Non-exempt means that you are subject to overtime pay and a half after 40 hours.
Absolutely.
Keeping track of that, and there's also an issue inside that regarding authorization for that overtime, correct?
Correct.
Okay, explain that, please.
Well, an employer has the ability to say, we want our employees to work during these hours and no more. We want to control our budgets and things of that nature. So they can have a policy that says, we're not allowing you to work overtime unless it's been previously authorized. However, some employers think that if an employee works time that they shouldn't have worked or weren't authorized to work, that they don't have to be paid for it. And that's not the case. Actually, the remedy for that is to pay the employee on the one hand and then issue discipline to the employee on the other hand for violating the employer's policy so they don't do it again.
Right, meaning that the employer would pay for the overtime, but also reprimand that employee for saying, hey, it's fine, but don't do that again without authorization, which makes a lot of sense on both sides of the issue if you think about that. I know we're moving through a lot of information quickly here, but quite honestly, Michael, the biggest one is the tip credit issue. Can you address that?
Sure. So right now under New York state law, restaurants can pay, or not just restaurants, but tipped employees can be paid a little bit lower than the current minimum wage, $7.50, as long as they make up the difference to the minimum wage with their tips. What New York State is looking to do is to eliminate that tip credit so that those in the service industry would have to pay the full minimum wage and not get that tip credit, and which is a very big deal for the restaurant industry.
I'll tell you what we're hearing in civilian terms. We're hearing that it, I would have to say that, and I'm helping you translate, right? Help translate for our audience. But the idea there is that, without the tip incentive, without the ability to make tips, the issue, if you're an owner of a restaurant, is I might have to raise prices because I have to pay the employees more because they're not getting the tips. I may have to reduce my hours, my menu prices may change, something like that. On the other side, the employees who are part of the service industry are saying, we count on those tips. That's a major part of our income. Who's behind even wanting this kind of legislation?
The governor's office directed it and directed the Department of Labor to look into eliminating the tip credit. It is driven. There's a union organization that's driving this issue, but the number from the hearings that we've seen, there are just a number of both restaurateurs and the service workers who don't want this to happen. And because the service workers, there may be fewer jobs for them, if especially as restaurants can't afford to pay as a number of them, or if the restaurants go out of business due to the increased prices to them.
Where do you think it'll net out?
If I had to guess, I don't think it's going to go away altogether. I would guess that they would just raise that wage, that $7.50 to some level, somewhere between $7.50 and the current minimum wage.
Right. Would they still then allow the tips?
Possibly, but I think there might be some middle ground. But even if there's middle ground, the wage went to $7.50 from $5 a few years ago, and that's already resulted in higher increased costs for restaurants and some restaurants going out of business.
Whoa, okay. Sometimes I've interviewed a lot of people on this subject, Michael, and a lot of people just say to me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
That's a good saying.
The current system, the current system just seems to work for everybody.
There are very few examples, exactly, of employees not declaring tips on taxes.
Yes,
but
right.
we talked earlier, said bad facts make bad law,
Yes,
and you shouldn't pass an entire law just to go after a few wrongdoers.
Right. Boy, Michael, thank you for this information. It's really, really valuable. Look, you have any issues here regarding meal breaks, regarding overtime, go to your HR department, go to your employer, have a conversation. That's where this should all start, right? Is have a conversation about this, get educated, and then you'll know what your options are. And as you know, we're going to be following the tip credit issue very closely, and we'll have Michael on again and update us as you find out more information that would be valuable to the audience. Well, I look forward to seeing you again, Michael. Thank you very much for coming in. Great to see you. To see this interview again, you can head to our website, looktvonline.com.